quiet just thinking back to some of my earliest childhood memories made me laugh, as each memory I pondered on reminded me of something else. What I found funny is, no matter how far back in my mind I go, there's always something else. And even if I could remember which happened first, way back then, how could I possibly rely on my memory if I can't remember now the memories I had then? And on the other hand, how can I ignore them when they're the only memories I've got? Sid and I stayed with Aunt Lil. I remember when Laurie came to stay with us too. Sometimes Mom would stay there, but never for too long before she'd be off again. When Grandma got sick, Laurie had to come stay with us. When Grandma never came home from the hospital, Laurie didn't leave again, not for a long while. Straight out of high school, Laurie became a data technician. That's when things started to change. But I like to think about the things that happened before that, even though I regret being too young to understand the sadness a person must feel at 12 years old and both your parents are gone forever. I don't remember my granddaddy. He passed a month after Sid and I were born. And it was when I was 5 that Laurie came to stay, and the world got a whole lot bigger for Sid and me. Laurie would take us to places we'd never been before. I remember how it seemed to me that he always knew his way around, even before we got there. Everywhere he took us, everywhere we went was on bicycle, but it always ended up the same. Sid and I'd get tired. Laurie would double back and wait, usually just on the edge of familiar ground. Sid would catch up first, then I'd come up out of nowhere from behind and tag Laurie's tire, as if to say I just won a race. The way Laurie favored Sid was sometimes difficult to ignore, but he always let me tag along, and he always took good care of both of us. One up that Laurie had on Sid and I is he knew his daddy and his granddaddy. We all had Mom and Aunt Lil, but for Sid and I, we can only imagine what that would be like, even for a little while. Laurie was just like his daddy, named after his granddaddy. Granddaddy went by Lou, but Laurie's dad always insisted that you called him Lawrence. By the time I was 10, I'd tag along less and less. Sid and Laurie remained tight. Meanwhile, I was developing my tendency to lean toward my own interests. Didn't matter though. At the tail end of high school, Laurie didn't have time for Sid either, and he started to spend most of his spare time with a particular girl whose daddy got him the technician job. That was about the same time that Mom received her settlement, and Sid and I came to live here in the studio. It wasn't long after that when we heard the news that Laurie went and ran off and got married to that girl with the daddy that got him the job as a technician. They tried to have a child right away, but they couldn't. Seems Larry was unable. It was less than a year later that his wife got pregnant anyway. About the same time Larry got laid off while the company her daddy was working for was downsizing. After that, I never saw Laurie again. And now, Sid and I are here again, living in the studio. Again, like we did way back then when we left Aunt Lil's. And Sid and I were just 10. So as I was saying earlier, how could I trust my memories when I go back and I can only see through a child's eyes what I witnessed then? And in my mind, Laurie was one of the big people when he was only 12 and came to stay with Aunt Lil, making my world a whole lot bigger. Seems to me inside every body is a mind, and inside the mind, reality becomes subjective. Either that or I'm confused in my mind about some of the facts. I had a dream the other night. In the dream, I was running in a race with a baton. I was giving it my all, running as fast as I could. I reached out to pass the baton as the next runner was leading out, but no matter how I tried, I just couldn't catch him. I was getting tired, like I often felt just before I tagged Laurie's tire in an imaginary race. I don't remember how that dream ended, but I am certain that I was never able to pass that baton, because that's something I would remember. Mom inherited the studio as part of a settlement of an undisclosed amount in a long-standing battle on behalf of Sid and me, as it seems to be an occupational hazard to many short-term pop stars from that era to be tagged in a paternity suit. In and around 1984, when Mom got pregnant with twins, and she was 19. As a child, I remember watching studio managers come and go while Sid took to the bass guitar, and it wasn't long after that when I learned my way around a mixing console that between Sid and I, we could provide dub tracks for the artists when they weren't satisfied with their bandmates' performances. That was a long time ago, and an experience I left behind me. Although Sid never left the studio, the place we both call home. It's nobody's fault, but Sid and I are here under quarantine. Mom's QE exempt, but that's not the case with Larry, who purposely showed up here just the other night. So now Mom's little sister is our house guest. Before I get too far, leaving you thinking I just misspoke, I should explain something about my mother. See, Mom's rather accustomed to getting everything that she wants, even when it takes a while, like the settlement in a lawsuit, or always wanting to have a little sister. You might have guessed by now that Mom's little sister, my Aunt Larry, occupies the same body as the Lori that I remember from so long ago. Now, before I finished high school, a touring band came through the studio, offering me work as a roadie that I found difficult to refuse. And a month before graduation, I took the opportunity, fled the scene, and went on tour, learned the ropes, and eventually found myself at the controls of an 8-bus, 32-channel console. Meanwhile, Mom was doing her part in assisting Larry through his transformation and using her influence to help Larry enter into the business that is entertainment, eventually landing Larry a Saturday morning gig on a TV show entitled Aunt Larry's Picnic Party Playtime. They only made a few episodes before they were canceled, but there was a public outcry, and they were quickly brought back for 2 more seasons, which were rerun for years after that. Which brings me to the other day when Aunt Larry called.